am part of the events team, and I'm delighted to be bringing you 3 more events from the Bristol Distinguished Address Series this spring. Tonight is the first of these, a chance for us all to hear about what really drives the founder of The Wave, Nick Hounsfield. Tonight's conversation will be between 2 incredibly passionate water babies. One, a surfer, the other, a very cold water swimmer. I know that because I attempted one of her courses a couple of weekends ago and managed to only dip my toe in. They're both going to be sharing their fascinating insights about the positive effects that spending time in water can bring, and how more of us can and should access these benefits. So without further ado, I'd like to first introduce our host tonight, Maggy Blagrove, the director and founder of Open Minds Active. Maggy holds a master's in international development and has over 20 years of experience in sport and community development. Throughout her career, she has led numerous sport for social change initiatives across the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, Ireland and the UK, using physical activity to engage disadvantaged youth and marginalised communities in post-conflict settings. An experienced open water swimmer and coach, Maggy is passionate about tackling health inequalities, enabling more people to access and enjoy the outdoors. I'd now like to invite Rosamund Portis, lecturer in environmental management at UWE, to give an official introduction, and UWE welcome to our main speaker tonight, Nick Hounsfield.
Delighted and honoured as a representative of the School of Architecture and Environment to welcome visionary entrepreneur Nick Hounsfield to this Bristol Distinguished Address Series event. Starting with just £500 and a dream inspired by the sudden loss of his father, Nick Hounsfield raised £30 million to create The Wave, a world-first inland surfing destination in Bristol. Launched in 2019, The Wave has become a global model of triple bottom line business success, balancing profit, people, and the planet. It brings the physical and mental health benefits of water, waves, and nature to people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities. From a child stepping on a board for the first time to a professional training for the Olympics. Nick is also on the board of Surfing England and has been particularly involved in supporting and growing the profile of the parasurfing community. Beyond surfing and what our event tonight will focus on, Nick is a pioneer of the Blue House movement, which explores the transformative mental and physical benefits of connecting with water. Joining Nick and Maggy later tonight will be a special guest, poet, yoga teacher and parasurfer Stephen Lightbown, to share his own experiences of the enjoyment of water. Nick, Maggy, Stephen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to Bristol, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Going analogue with the microphone. Welcome everybody. I am so thrilled to be here with Nick this evening, as we both share such passion around blue health, and we've both been on quite a journey over some years, but in different ways. So before we kind of launch into the blue health, what it is, I'd just love to know, we've heard a bit about your background, but kind of where are things now and where are you at?
Where am I at? I never stand still, is the reality. Where I'm at the moment is, enjoying the success of 5 years of The Wave being open. It's nearly 5 years. It's been incredibly tricky time, but also incredibly fulfilling, being able to see smiling faces all day, every day. Well, the days when we're open, we're not quite open all the way through the winter. But even today, we had a varsity surf competition. I saw 500 people absolutely grinning ear to ear, having the best time. Half of them were surfing and half of them were just spectating, just enjoying the space, and also seeing there were young families with small kids playing in the play park and being in and around water and how important that is. So yeah, seeing it thriving, a place that, I guess it's a place of hope. That's what I always wanted to have, is a place of hope and be able to impact people's health and well-being. And where I am now, there's plans to do one of these in London, and I've also got my kind of personal mission, like what's beyond the wave is like, surfing's cool. I love surfing. I've been surfing for 46 years, but actually this is about how we can create blue spaces for the wider population, not just the people who can afford it, but people who can, who need it. That's me.
Great, thank you, Nick. So I'd really like to get into blue health, as there'll be, I think it's quite obvious from the title, however, I feel sometimes like I'm in an echo chamber, so I talk about blue health and I assume everybody knows what I'm talking about. But I would love to know, for the audience and for you, what does blue health mean for you? What is it?
Yeah, so I guess it's a feeling. It's a feeling that when I was super small, I felt like when I was around water, I was much calmer, I was much happier. It created a space where I could think without noise. Probably a little bit sort of, I'm not on the spectrum, I don't think, well, some people will say I am, but as in just calming the mind. I've always got racing thoughts, and I realised even tiny age that I loved being in and around water. In fact, one of my earliest memories, not just surfing, I can remember, I was thinking of this the other day, my dad, to try and calm me down when I was around water, so I wasn't such a nuisance, he, when we visited my grandma who lived right next to the beach, he would sit me on the breakwater, and he'd create I can remember it now, a bamboo rod, a bamboo stick from the garden. He'd wrap a bit of hosing around it so it looked like a fishing rod, and he would dangle with some line, some nuts and bolts, and said, if you do that for a couple of hours, you're going to catch a fish. I didn't catch a fish, obviously, but what he realised is that me being in and around water still and just watching waves lapping and just calmed me down. And that's just something that's continued. And it's only later, and it's particularly much later, when I realised that I was absolutely my happiest when I was in the water and around water, and then I got properly into surfing. I was like, oh my God, it's cool and good for me. And obviously the wave started to develop. But I had 5 years ago, I had a massive stroke, and it was only after I had my stroke and I got back into the water and realised that my brain was better, healing, because I was in and around water. I could feel my brain starting to repair, and my speech was coming back. I lost all speech when I had my stroke, but every single day I got into the water, I was finding I was getting better and better and better. And the other thing was having an afternoon nap. Like overnight, I was okay. I was rested, but it was only the afternoon naps that was so restorative. And I was like, there's something in there. There's something in this, and I knew it. But actually, we started to research it, and we were doing more and more work with you guys at Open Minds Active, going, like, there is properly something in this. This is something that I know works, and we should be sharing it as wide as possible. So ultimately, Blue Health is around how you feel better physically, mentally, by being in and around water. You don't have to be in the water. We see amazing effects of people just coming along and watching waves, or being in around waves, and seeing happiness and smiles on people's faces, as well as the physical benefits. Obviously, if you can get in the water, then that's great as well. And obviously there's lots of research about how being in and around water is good for your body and good for your soul. Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about the physiological and some of the mental. With Open Minds, a big part of what we're trying to do is create that community and connection in blue spaces, which I think is equally as important as the blue spaces. Can you talk maybe a bit around how you've evolved that community and connection? Because I think there's that trinity of the nature, be it green or blue, community and connection. Can you speak to that maybe?
Yeah, so right at the beginning, so my background's actually in osteopathy. So I qualified as an osteopath too long ago in 1997 and was practicing here as an osteopath for about 18 years, set up a practice on the Gloucester Road, the family practice. And I was really happy doing what I was doing, but I realised that most of the patients that were coming to see me day in, day out, there were some common themes. Obviously they might have had injuries or what have you, but actually the people that were coming chronically back to see me was because they were disconnected from people and they're disconnected from the environment. So the people who were lonely, I realised that a lot of people are just coming because they were lonely. They wanted to talk to me, they wanted to have hands-on medical treatment and sort of manipulation and all the rest of it, but actually they were just fundamentally lonely. I was like, oh, that's pretty sad. And they were also not getting outside, they were not exercising, they weren't finding their green space and their blue space. And it was at that time where, I can't remember the timing, but it was when there was like riots going on in Bristol and all sorts of places in the UK. And there was this sort of disconnect where like the elderly people that I was seeing were too scared to go out, and they were probably reading too much of the Daily Mail and thinking that there's going to be a hoodie around the corner that's going to mug them and all the rest of it. So they weren't getting outside. And you just know that the society starts to break down when that starts to happen, where there's a disconnect to people and also a disconnect to being outside and in that environment. So 100% that connection to people and also to planet is paramount, and that's absolutely the philosophy by which we started the wave at the start. It wasn't around surfing. It was around getting people together, eating well, having a good time, and that connection, the nature connection and the people connection.
Thanks, Nick. So part of the work that we've done together is around building that community and connection in blue spaces. And we've set up, I'm going to ask a question. Has anyone heard of the phrase social prescribing? Oh yeah, I bet, thanks. So social prescribing is, I sometimes find it such a strange concept that we have to be prescribed nature, that we have to be prescribed water, that we have to be prescribed community. But actually, I feel that we've been in such a mental health crisis in the UK and arguably globally that we need help and support with that in order to be able to get the most vulnerable accessing these spaces. So we offer open water swimming as a chance for people to connect in blue spaces, and we work with the Wave around the surfing programs, which has been really beneficial. But there is we're fans, we're advocates, but there is the kind of so what. You know, we've had to do a lot around changing hearts and minds around the proper research. Can you talk a little bit about the research that you've been involved with in the Wave? Because that's been a key part in kind of changing this perception. And I know we've been involved in a randomised control trial with the NHS that's looking at outdoor swimming as a cure for symptoms of depression and anxiety. And we've also been involved with an amazing bit of research at the Wave. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it's like if you want to change anything in the world, is that ultimately you're going to have, if you look at it negatively, that there are going to be doubters there going, actually, this is woo-woo stuff. It's like you jump in the water and you feel better. Well, of course, because you're having loads of fun and all the rest of it. But does it really change anything? The sort of so what, as you say. So having research to be able to back up what we think is happening and being able to provide absolute evidence that this actually does improve people's mental health, their well-being, and actually being able to provide data for that. It helps us in lots of levels. Internally for us, it it tells us that we're doing the right thing, and that's important for us as a team of wave makers. It tells our investors, which is important, say actually this is worth backing, so that hopefully you can then, we've done an MSc with Bristol Uni. We're going to do a PhD with them now. We've managed to get funding from the wave to be able to do that, but that requires some evidence to say, well, this is worth investing in. But for us, if we can start to break down that sort of taking something that is anecdotal to something that is real, what would be great for definitely my view, and I think we're shared, is if we can actually get people to look after themselves. We're in a health crisis, without a doubt, and if we can, and the NHS is on its knees at the moment, but actually a big part of that is around our responsibility to look after ourselves. And I could see that in private practice with the people I was seeing, but actually you can see that right across society. People need to look after their own health, and the NHS should be there for when you literally are struggling, or you've got something really complicated. But actually most of the diseases that I was seeing in practice were because they were just making the wrong decisions. And actually, if you can evidence the fact that you can make the right decisions in life, and then try and work out how, and this is the tricky thing, how they can access the right decisions, because most people who are making the poor decisions in life are surrounded, they're in an environment by which the poor decisions are just there and easy, and the harder decisions to make, which are probably better for their health, a lot of people don't even know what that is. So a massive amount is around education, without a doubt. Yeah. Did that answer your question? I've no idea.
Yeah, I think so.
Hopefully. If not, it was great.
It was a great answer though. But thinking about how we put people, I'm really interested in this concept of putting people at the centre of their own health, especially with Blue Health. Now, you and I come from quite a privileged position, and we've had access to this stuff. So what are some of first of all, what are some of the challenges? I mean, you know what I'm going to say with the wave and people accessing it, and there's two questions. So we'll talk about the challenges first, but also how we overcome that collectively, because it's not just the wave's responsibility, it's not just Open Mind's responsibility, how we overcome some of these challenges.
What was the question?
I don't know. What was So, some of we want to put people in charge of their own health.
Yeah.
But we need to make it accessible.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? What are some of the barriers that you've seen at the wave of us being able to do that with people?
Yeah. So the obvious barrier, initial barrier, is around probably knowing that we're there. So there's like a marketing side that we need to make sure that people can realise that they can just go to the wave and you don't have to pay anything. You just need to rock up in the car park. You've got to walk a distance. If you've got disabilities, then we can sort that out and you can get close to the place. And actually it's free to use, it really is. But most people assume that there'll be like a gate price and you've got to pay to come. And I think that's a mindset. I think we internally have to think about that. And also externally, that this is actually, we've created a slice of ocean inland, and it should be everybody's beach. Like literally, it's everybody's beach, and we have got however many thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in 90 minutes drive time from us, and we need to be talking about it being everybody's beach so that people could just come and use the place for what it is. You would go down to the beach and walk along a pier or what have you, down at Clevedon or Weston or wherever you might be, or Brighton. That's the same that we've got there. It's a slice of ocean that you can walk along the pier, and if you just do that, you're probably going to feel a lot better afterwards. So that's just knowing that we're there, is that awareness piece is so important, just as a starting point of view. Yeah.
And because surfing, it requires a lot of kit.
Yep.
It requires wetsuits, boards, all that kind of stuff. There's a cost there, there's an expense there. Are you seeing at the wave, as it's evolved over the years, do you know kind of roughly how many people are just coming to watch for those Blue Health benefits, or is it having an impact on participation in the sport as well?
Yeah, I think last year was a really different year for the Wave, where we really focused on filling the surfing slots, because that's ultimately what will help us from a revenue point of view, and that allows us to continue. But what was amazing last year is we had so many visitors who were just coming and checking out the place. And actually, from a financial point of view, our what they call secondary revenue spends are people buying coffees, teas, having lunch, buying a t-shirt, whatever it might be. Suddenly realised actually this is becoming a real visitor destination rather than a surfing facility, so to speak. And our job is to try and see if we can get the pricing right, so that people then can go, oh, you know what, this is an amazing place. Oh, and actually there's some amazing people here. There are people of all ages, all backgrounds, and all abilities surfing here. I now don't feel like it's something that is inaccessible to me. And then the massive thing for us is then getting the pricing right, so that then go, oh, actually I can afford that. And that's the balance at the moment. For us being a triple bottom line business, where we're really looking after people, planet and profit all together, but we've had to borrow £30 million, and we've got to pay that back, without a doubt. That's the bit at the moment which is the sort of biggest challenge so far, where we've got a very, very clear purpose about what we need to do, but ultimately we've had to borrow money from people who've got very short-term thinking. So this long-term, short-term thinking, long-term vision with short-term thinking finance really doesn't mix. And you can see it across all of society. So like trying to find like legacy projects which can be funded with legacy money, who will be in it for the long term. That's the golden frame. If we can get that right, then I think we can really break down some of those barriers, particularly financially, for people to come and use the place more, because it's a massive barrier. I've always said since day one, if this ends up being a middle class white playground, I've absolutely failed. And there are times when we get under pressure that almost that starts to happen. And that's the thing, I guess, about having a clear vision, be a clear founder, keep beating the drum at board level, right down to the people, staff, right down, in the trenches, delivering these surf sessions. Like we can be better than this. This is not just a middle class white playground. This has to be better than that. Yeah.
And that follows on nicely to my next question, which is around still building on that inclusion and accessibility. I mean, we've been coming to the Wave now for, I think this is going to be our fourth year with Open Minds, and one thing we've realised that there are so many barriers to access. We've talked a little bit about cost and also the location, but we know that access is not equitable. For all kinds of reasons, and for the perception, even us, we're white allies and we're trying to create an accessible and welcoming space, but that has its challenges. And I know when we were working with the women, we run a programme to try and break down those barriers, and one of those massive barriers was not being able to swim, and that disproportionately impacts global majority communities. I think we've got some stats somewhere around that, from Sport England and also from the Black Swimming Association. There's a huge fear of water. Adults do not swim. I think 95% of black adults do not swim in the UK, and that was a terrifying stat. That shouldn't be happening. So there's so many steps that we need to go back in order to be able to move forward with accessibility. And I know that was a really great thing of us being able to come and have those discussions with the Wave about how we make those places and how do we make people feel welcome. So my question is, how do we continue that? We've made inroads. What can we do to make sure more communities and more people feel welcome in blue spaces? Big question.
Jeepers. So yeah, I guess for me it's always going to be about linking up with people who can, like-minded people who are on the same mission to achieve the same goals, and making sure that we're utilising the space that we've created to the maximum. It is a travesty every time I walk to the Wave and I walk out there and it might be a sort of half-empty session, or even, we need to be utilising that water body as much as possible. But I guess it goes back to what we were saying earlier, like what's next. The what's next, I think, is around I can see every time people go out from the Wave that there are smiles on their faces, all the rest of it, but then they get back to their own communities where they live and they work, and there's a real disconnect back again, and they're hankering after. It's a bit like when we go on holiday and we're working like Billy to go on holiday, and we have an amazing time, hopefully for a couple of weeks, and then the next 50 weeks we're desperate to go back and do it again. It's just like that so doesn't make sense in my eyes. Like, how can we make sure that the living fabric of where we, literally where we live and where we work and where we play has got access to blue spaces and green spaces to a degree by which it improves people's health? Because the way that we've developed stuff previously over decades and decades and decades just doesn't make sense. And again, it's driven by probably profiteering through the housing market and housing development. But like, how can we build new spaces or retrofit blue spaces and green spaces so that people don't have to walk far to be able to have access to it? We should be opening up things like litres. We should be opening up paddling pools. We're pretty lucky. Just the part around the corner has got a paddling pool. It's absolutely rammed in summer. Absolutely rammed. But every single park should have that. And actually, we need to start looking at how we can open up blue spaces and green spaces for people so that they're actually healthier and happier. And to me, until we break down this weird cycle about how we develop people's housing and look at the spaces where people work, then it's always going to be something that we're all dreaming to get to, but actually we're not living amongst it. And you can see, it's crazy that we've got we're an island nation. It's just bonkers that we've got like blue, greyish sea all around us. But the disconnect to the coastal communities. And, we've got friends who, we've got a friend of a friend who's headmaster at Delabole, right next to the coastline, and loads of their community don't go to the beach. It's crazy. So it feels like there needs to be a real mental shift. And if we also, layering onto that, is if we're wanting to protect a planet and protect these marine environments and we don't actually have a connection to it, it's crazy. Saw a friend of mine today who was trying to take the government to court for pollution and all the rest of it. And it's really hard to feel that connection if you're not deeply wedded into that blue. And it's something that we should all be aware of, but getting that connection to the blue is so important. So I think to me, it's about creating spaces that you live, work and play in, not just play in, actually becomes the fabric of your life. Yeah.
And going back to, I think we saw in the pandemic, for example, when we saw a huge inequality of people accessing blue and green spaces. Many communities in Bristol, one of the reasons which inspired me to start Open Minds is why that people don't have the tools to be able to access this. They don't have the means, they don't have the transport, they don't have the money, and they don't feel welcome in these spaces, which we've discussed. And how do we change that? Because we also see with the families that we work with and the women that have been accessing the Wave, what took us by surprise is that a lot of them actually didn't want to surf, they just wanted to come and see what it was like. And that ripple effect of then them saying, how much are we going to bring my husband and kids, and that kind of wider ripple effect has been really powerful at the Wave, but it has had its challenges with, you know, different communities not feeling welcome. So my kind of question is, how do we what's next for us as the blue people? Like, what's your vision for blue health in the UK? Like, what do you want to do with it now?
Yeah. I think first of all we need to just come together. So, you know, I see it a little bit. So I do a lot of work with sort of marine protection foundations and stuff like that, and it seems like there are so many people in that marine protection space, or it might be around marine plastics or what have you, and everyone's sort of kind of vying to create this to be, I guess, almost like be the best, or be the best advocate for this. And I've always been really frustrated that why don't you all come together and actually, you know, the power of one is so much more important. I think anything that we do as a blue health community going forwards has absolutely got to be open sourced. Egos need to be dropped. This is an egoless way of approaching a real health problem. And if we can come together and, you know, a bit like, you know, our place is almost a bit like a laboratory where we can do tests, we can do research, working with you, working with, you know, amazing other people, and making sure that we're utilising as much blue space as possible. Get that research going. That's going to be so important. And then we need to create a voice and actually go to politicians, policymakers, probably more importantly, which never is actually the politicians, and canvass them and say, look, this is something that we can solve some of your national health issues by just doing the right thing, building nice spaces or revitalising lost spaces. So I think that we've got the infrastructure, a lot of the infrastructure around there. There just needs to be a will, and the will always need to be backed up with research, and it comes back to that. So it might feel at the moment we're doing something relatively small and relatively we've got some impact in a small community, but it's then just sharing that knowledge. You know, for us, we've got, I guess there's like 10 wave pools that have opened up all around the world. For me, you know, my responsibility is go to those wave pools and say, this is really important, you should be doing this research. We can open source what we're doing, just do it. It's the right thing to do. And that's a very small community. We should be looking at, you know, any kind of open water bodies to see if we can, you know, influence and create that collective voice.
On that point, for the last couple of years, we were members of the Blue Space Consortium, where you started bringing different organisations around to help us with this connection, and also to kind of say, we're all working in this space, but what next? What is next for that particular group? Are there plans to expand? It was very surfing focused. Would you like to kind of open it up to more accessibility across all things blue? Are there what's the next step for that?
Not really talked about that, but I guess it's to grow that network. Really, it's about how to grow that network and keep them together. Because actually, if everybody's out doing their work in silos, then actually there's a lot of energy, a lot of money being put into something that is less impactful than if you bring it together. So, you know, there's, you know, from a surfing point of view, there's a surf therapy organisation, an international one, which they've done that exactly the same thing, where we're sharing research. We're actually trying to, you know, raise money to be able to further do some research, and I think that that's something that we should be doing. You know, we've got a couple of pretty amazing universities just down, you know, that's why we're here today, but actually combining, you know, their ability to provide incredible research to work with us to see if we can get this growing body of work so that we can actually prove, you know, what we do will make a difference. So to me, that particular consortium or group of us, that's the way we should be expanding, is making sure we're together, because as soon as we go off in silos, people are just spending time, money, resources, and having less impact. There'll always be more impact together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd really like to invite Stephen to the stage now. If you want to come on over, Stephen. So Stephen Lightbown is a Bristol-based poet, children's author, yoga teacher and adaptive surfer. Stephen uses his poems to give a voice to his disability, and is also the author of 3 poetry collections. And next year his first children's picture book will be published. When he's not writing, Stephen can be found surfing and is a passionate advocate for the power of blue health. He has represented England twice at the ISA World Parasurf Championships in California and helped Team England to a 4th place finish at the 2023 World Championships. Wow. Welcome, Stephen. So having listened to Nick and I know we all have a shared passion. I'd love to hear a bit about your own blue health journey, as I'm sure everybody else would, and some reflections maybe on the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a really fascinating conversation to listen to for me, and I've just found myself nodding along at so many points that have been made. I had an accident when I was 16. I had a sledging accident. I was going backwards and I hit a tree. And my life changed overnight. And often when I look back at where things have started for me or interests, I kind of always come back to that point. But actually, blue health and water, a bit like Nick spoke about, for me was from being tiny. Like, one of my earliest memories is just seeing a swimming pool and walking into it. Before I could swim, my dad had to jump in and get me. And I was saying to you before we started, like in summers I would go, I mean, it is no wonder that I'm saying in general, I would go tombstoning in quarries and things like that before, and I was always near water, always had to be in water, and I hadn't quite put my finger on what that was from. And then when I had my accident, the one thing I was itching to do was to get back into water. I couldn't necessarily articulate why that was until I got into the water. And then it was then freedom. So the freedom of being in the water, a kind of weightlessness that came with that. And I just felt calm. So all the issues that I'd faced, all the anger that I felt about why this had happened to me disappears when I'm in the water. I just become a head like everybody else, just bobbing about. And I just my disability becomes invisible. And it's just fantastic to have that freedom. And so I'd done things like open water swims, kayaked, I'd water skied, and it was 20 years, I think it was, before I managed to get back in the sea after my accident. It was a pretty cool place. I was on holiday in Barbados, so like it was, if I'm going to get back in the sea anywhere, it would be there. But then during lockdown, like many people, I felt landlocked in my own home. And then when we started to kind of open up again, I read an article in The Guardian about an adaptive surf camp that was taking place at the Wave. And there's a surfer called Bruno Hansen who is paraplegic like me. And I looked at him holding a surfboard and I was like, hang on a minute. What's this? Can you surf? As if you can surf. And then I was like, wow, surfing, that's really good. And then I was like, Bristol? Is it like it's in Bristol? So then I went and had my first session in October of 2020, and that is still the biggest smile that I've ever experienced. This was the sort of first session, and the guy at the back, Matty, is still my coach there. Like I'm going surfing with him in a couple of weeks. Like, and it's incredible. Yeah. So I would say the freedom and the weightlessness and the calm. I could go on, but I'll let you.
But that's some trajectory from turning up for a session and then representing England.
Well, I think there's twofold there. I think there's been lots of talk about this past couple of weeks about people with disabilities not fulfilling their potential, not needing to be in work to fill their potential. I worked for nearly 20 years in the NHS, and my only drive in that period was to prove people wrong, to prove that I could get senior jobs, that I could get onto board level positions. when I started to write poetry, I was like, right, I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to write poems about disability. I'm going to get books published. And that translated itself into surfing. So when I started surfing, I was like, right, I'm going to... And then that was about the first year of surfing. And then I kind of had a conversation with myself. And I said, this is not healthy. This kind of... The way I was approaching that was to want to... Nick's been surfing for 46 years, but to try and cram 46 years worth of surfing into 4 years, because in disability sport, the numbers are so much smaller. So it's much easier to have these opportunities to get into competitions or to have the carrot of the world. So it was a blessing and also a curse, because I was so desperate to go and do that, to prove to people that I could do it. And then you said that I contributed to the team coming forward. I came last in my heat, so I'm not sure. I carried the flag at the start in the parade. Yeah. But being there around the team was incredible. Since I've realised, actually, the happiest part for me is when I'm just on the board where it's flat and the waves aren't coming. If I catch a wave, that is a bonus. And there's a great quote I love, which is the best surfer is the one with the biggest smile on their face. That is what I come back to at all times, really, is that remembering why I'm doing it.
And that, I think both of you are good examples of positive surfing culture, because there have been problems with the perception of surfing over the years. Have you both surfed together, by the way?
Yeah, we will have done.
Yeah.
Amazing. But what have been some of the challenges for you around, we talked a lot about access and inclusion, and what have been some of the challenges for you accessing the blue spaces?
Yeah, one of the challenges is being able to actually just catch a wave. I love this photograph because it looks really impressive, but actually anyone that really knows what's happening is in completely the wrong position. 3 seconds after that picture was taken, all that water dumped on my head.
Guillotine.
That is the biggest challenge. That's why I wear a helmet. It's just, I like it because it looks cool, but really it's a terrible picture. But, one of the biggest challenges for me is the physical access. I think Nick spoke about being an island nation. For an island nation, we have terrible access to beaches and to water. Being able to just get into water. My local swimming pool at Longwell Green in Bristol has got a hoist that has been out of action for months, which means you can't go swimming.
Yeah.
So that's the basic requirement that you need. Places like the Wave have got great access into. I think but the cost of a beach wheelchair is around £4,000. So it is expensive. To have decent changing facilities and parking facilities near the beach is really difficult. We talk about things like being on the water as well. So if you at Bristol, you look on the water and all the boats are on the water. None of the water taxis are accessible apart from the one that goes from Brunel across, which I go on a daily basis with my son because I want him to see that it is something that's doable. None of the other boats, apart from the Matthew when that's running, are accessible. I think that's a disgrace. I think for a city that has got so much water on it, to not have that accessibility. And so I think people are missing out because Nick's absolutely right. You can go to the Wave and experience it, but I think people are put off from going to do stuff because they're just like, I can't access it. So to go and think, I want to get on a beach, that should just be a fundamental right to be able to get on a beach. Other countries do it so much better. In Greece, where they have the sea where it's much calmer, but they have a rail with a seat on that is motorised, and you just sit on that and it takes you into the water. Like it's not, these things aren't hard, but you need the will, you need the investment, and you need to see the impact that has, I think, to be able to make those things work.
What changes have you seen at the Wave with access of the parasurfers? How has it developed? Because I know the Wave's been quite instrumental in developing the sport as well.
I met up with an amazing guy called Spike Kane, who's almost feels like the grandfather of disability surfing, really, isn't he? He's just a lovely guy. And I met up with him and said, look, can you work with the architects, our amazing Bristol-based architects, APG, and can you work out together how we can have up to 30, 40 people in probably wheelchairs or just making sure that this is a safe place for people to be able to come and be able to come surfing. We need to, from the absolute architecture of the whole place and the landscaping and making sure we've got good wheelchair access and all the rest. And some things we still need to improve without a doubt, but it was from the get-go that we made sure that was designed from the start. And that allowed us, I think it was in year one that we had the adaptive surfing competition at the Wave, which was a sort of real benchmark of going, like, this is the bare minimum of what we should be doing if we're going to be building these kind of things, because we were the first in the world of this particular technology, so we needed to make sure that the benchmark was as high as we possibly could. And then from then on, is the big thing for us is about participation. Like, exactly the same as Stephen said. Like that's how he got into it, is by knowing that there was a competition there, and then we had, I don't know if you did the sort of sessions beforehand of trying it for the first time, and that's great. So we sort of have a morning where we're dedicating to allow people with all ranges of disabilities to be able to come in and try it for the first time. So if we can keep growing that audience of people trying it for the first time, growing it is so important for the sport. And there's many different reasons for doing that. From my perspective, it's like, if you can fire the excuse, like if you've got somebody who's able-bodied walking along and maybe they're a little bit overweight or they've got a slightly dicky knee or what have you, and then you've got somebody who is paralysed or has only got one limb or blind or whatever it is, going, oh my God, I've now fired my excuses. Like, there's no reason why I can't do this. That's really powerful. That's really, really powerful. And without a doubt, when I go surfing and we've got a couple of the adaptive athletes in there, the other surfers that come up to me is like, it's freaking cool that like we're surfing with these people. They're amazing. It's like I'm now just enjoying it rather than feeling really stressed about whether I've done the right turn or what have you. It's like, this is about just freaking enjoying it. Yeah. So that's why it's important to do, and that's why we need to grow that community. And particularly, we're pretty lucky in the next couple of Olympic cycles. I'm pretty sure surfing will be in the Paralympics. And I think that if we're in a position whereby we can grow the sport, without a doubt, if we had the Paralympics next year and surfing was in it, we will have medalists, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And so if we can grow that sport to prepare, not only will we be able to put it on an amazing stage, but also it's an amazing story of hope for people who've maybe just got injured or just become paralysed or just become blind, and go, actually, like, this is pretty cool. Like, my life might have felt like it's over. And the wonderful Spike Kane always says this, actually, it's going to be different, but actually you're going to open yourself up to a whole new community of amazing people. And to me, that's a story of hope that we've always wanted to ingrain in the Wave, so people can come there, with hope. And, people like Stephen and Zoe, who comes quite regularly now, and she learned to surf at the Wave, which is amazing, that's why we've done it. Those are the times when I look at around the Wave and just go, yeah, like we've succeeded. Yeah.
So you fully embraced Blue Health, Stephen, but if we're to give some advice to students, this is through UE, or people who are looking to engage with Blue Health and Blue Spaces for the first time, that want to take those steps to make changes for their own mental health and well-being, what advice or what first steps would you advise and get them to take?
So in terms of people actually accessing it,
or just what things they could do for their well-being with Blue Space.
So I think it's just embrace it, find it, and just be around Blue Spaces. I think that there is I don't know the research, I just know how it makes me feel, and that is just the calmness that comes with that, the clarity of mind, the kind of the freedom, whether that's in being in the water or on the water or by the water. you know, like Nick was saying, whether or not people, I don't know. I mean, I have. People are always surprised in some reasons, but I have lots of tattoos, and most of them are of water or visa or surfing or things like that. And I think for me, I also then just get to look at my arm and find it, you know, like that's how much it means to me. And I think my phone is full of recordings of waves that I've sat by the beach. And so there's ways you can kind of do that. We are really lucky in Bristol that there is so much water, whether it's the Avon, whether it's lakes that we've got, whether it's the actual harbour itself and the wave. So I think the excuses of the people that don't make it possible, because actually they are the barriers that are there. I think for everybody else it's find the way. And even if sometimes I find with myself and others in the disability community, we kind of have to be the forerunners for people to kind of follow. So unless we are doing it, then I think you need those role models, you need the visibility of people doing things to then, if you see yourself in pictures or you see yourself in those spaces. My wife, really interesting, as you say from the research part of the global majority, when she was learning to swim when she was at school, she actually had to sit out because she was told that if she got into the water she would sink. And so she didn't swim for 15, 20 years. And it was only when I started to go in, she felt like she wanted to go in again, because she was like, well, if he can get in, then I can get in. And I think those kind of, but she didn't see herself in pictures and blue spaces. So the more we can promote people doing it, I think people will then be able to come follow and think that's something that they can do and participate in.
Yeah. It's that classic, you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And having that visual representation and storytelling is really important. But yeah, any nuggets of wisdom or advice that you would give to someone trying to start their blue health journey?
Well, one thing I did in lockdown, I think it was in lockdown, it's pretty close to lockdown, I actually got we had an old tin bath, and I filled it with water and put some, well, the frogs came in there, and then and I created this little, it's probably about this size, but it's like, I feel like it's my little sit spot. So I'm in, you know, we've only got a small garden, but this little space where I can just sit and look at water. And obviously we now got some like lily pads and got some reeds and stuff like that. But being able to be in and around water, honestly, just a space like that was enough for me to be able to go, I'm just going to sit next to that and reflect. I tried some fishing there, it didn't work because it gets really cold in the winter. Don't do that. But having a space where you can just reflect, and suddenly you've got dragonflies coming and landing, and see nature come into that space. To me, something as simple as that I was trying to think about, can we design something that is really, really accessible so that people can make their own like little sit spot, their own little pond wherever they live. But simple things like that, again, it's just being in and around water. Find your local place that you can just sit. You don't necessarily have to swim, surf, what have you. Is like look on the map and just try and find those amazing places. And you know, they're out there, and you know, there's a really great community of people who swim and utilize those places. So just find them and take people for walks. You know, going for a walk and then going for a pub lunch if you can, or whatever it might be, but just create a community around doing things like that, being in those blue spaces. So important, and spreading the word is so important. Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Stephen. So before we hand over to questions, Stephen, you've got a poem that you were going to read for us.
That's the bit where people don't think they're a poetry reading, that Sean can take a breath of water. I promise you, it's pretty short. So I've a lot of the poems that I write, this isn't one of mine, I've never really tried to, it's very hard to find a good poem about surfing. My next children's collection, I've only written surfing poems, and I sent them to my publisher in November, and I've not heard back yet. So I think they think this is a bit niche. But I found a poem by someone called Judith Wright, who's an Australian, and this poem's from 1946. It's the only one I've been able to really find. So I just think it's cool on many levels, and Yeah, I promise you, honestly, just zone out if poetry's not your thing. It's not bad, I promise you. So anyway, it's called The Surfer. He thrust his joy against the weight of the sea, climbed through, slid under those long banks of foam, hawthorn hedges in spring, thorns in the face stinging. How his brown strength drove through the hollow and coil of green through weirs of water. Muscle of arm thrust down long muscle of water, and swimming, so went out of sight. Where mortal, masterful, frail, the gulls went wheeling in air as he in water with delight. Turn home, the sun goes down, swimmer turn home. Last leaf of gold vanishes from the sea curve. Take the big roller's shoulder, speed and swerve, come to the long beach home like a gull diving. For on the sand the grey wolf sea lies snoring. Cold twilight, wind splits the waves' hair and shows the bones they worry in wolf teeth. Or wind blows and sea crouches on sand, foaming and mouthing, drops there, snatches again, drops again, snatches its broken toys in whitened pebbles and shells. If someone fell asleep, can you just nudge them and tell them another back to the Q&A?
Don't go anywhere because it's time for questions. Is that right, Julia? So there were some questions submitted. If people don't want to ask now, I've got some I've prepared earlier, or you've prepared earlier. But maybe we can throw it open first. Hello, are we doing we can't do a mic, can we? You're going to have to shout.
I can talk quite loudly.
Brilliant.
I'm a mentor for young people. I work with a charity who pair children who are disadvantaged or neurodiverse, all or most have suffered trauma. And I just wondered, do you already have, or is there a space for places like The Wave to work with charities who have children who have been referred by like North Somerset Council, they're in a school programme already, to be able to access facilities like The Wave. I'm also a swimming coach and open water swimmer, so I'm fully converted. And I believe these young people are the least likely to be able to access these wonderful things because they don't have a home environment that can support it, but they're potentially the most likely to flourish, find resilience and self-confidence in something like this. So.
Yes. Simple answer. So we've got an impact program that we run at The Wave, which we pretty much support exactly the demographic that you're talking about. We particularly work with adaptive surfers or parasurfers and breaking down barriers, any actual or perceived barriers, and supporting people who've got mental health issues and trying to support them to some form of recovery. So what we have is, we donate from The Wave, or we also, in combination, we have partners who will help fund, and then we've got some amazing customers who also, when they check out, they put a contribution in there, and it's a really decent pot every year. So that allows us to, get over the sort of funding issues that there might be there, and it's just 100% worth a conversation. So impact@thewave.com. If anybody's working in this space and want to find out a little bit more and see if we can work out some form of partnership around this, then what we try and do is we've got the space, and what we try and do is team up with funders who will also help unlock that with ourselves. So it's definitely worth a conversation. Yeah, perfect. It'll go to Abby.
I think there's, gentlemen. I can see.
Yeah, I can massively vouch for that. With Off the Record, we've just partnered with the Wave Project. We're doing a learning course running for 6 weeks in June for young people who are experiencing mental health issues for 6 weeks as part of the Wave Project program, which is amazing. So yeah, I definitely vouch for what X just said there.
great.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I pestered them a lot, didn't I, Abby? And we've had, our partnership's 4 years old now, and we work particularly with women of colour, but also women who've been survivors of domestic violence as well. So we have a really thriving every year group of women who come back and also mentor and support others in the water. So, and the Wave have been really supportive of that.
Cool.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
Hello,
Gentleman
hi.
in front.
Thanks so much. It's been really inspiring actually to listen to your stories. I mean, the lengths that you've gone to bring the blue space into Bristol is quite extraordinary, I think, which I think is an amazement in itself. But I think as well the effort collectively that's put into excluding people from waterways and rivers is also quite extraordinary. I mean, like you said, Bristol is a water city, yet there are very high walls. Rivers are out of view, for instance, or these water spaces are out of view and often inaccessible. Do you think there's something about coming together as a region to open up our waterways, whether they're on the coast or whether they're inland? Often accessing the harbour is quite easy, but you go out of Bristol even a little way, and that becomes really, really tough. And I found that quite confusing. And I wondered if you had any plans to try and bring a wider vision across the region to really open up our water spaces for everybody.
This floats my boat particularly. Yeah, look, I think for me this should be a nationwide looking at what we're doing with the spaces that we've got there. We need to re-look about. I mean, this goes right up to sort of government level. Like, we need the buy-in about how important this will be to impact people's health and well-being and be part of it. It's obviously not the be-all and end-all for people's health issues, but it's a big part of it, I think. And I think that you literally need to master plan the nation again, is my feeling. However, we have to start somewhere. The Wave is a small slice of ocean, but what we have proved, and that's why the research is important, is that it's having an impact. So you then go, right, well, what if? And again, to me, it always goes back to the what if. That's where I exist, is what if. What if we were able to build communities based around that principle? What if those are more than communities, these are villages? What if they're now towns? What if they're cities based around those principles? So at the moment I'm doing lots and lots of research, trying to team up with people who are like-minded. They already know that instinctively this is the right way that we should be looking at housing developments, big, we know there's a housing crisis, we know there's a health crisis. We need to do the two together, without a doubt. And how can we do that? That's tricky because you're having to change policy, because the policy, particularly with house building over the last X number of years, hasn't been great for people's health and isn't great for the environment. How can we change that as a collective and master plan, ideally master plan the whole nation again? We know we've got to put housing in there, but can we do it in a sensitive way that actually puts in blue health and green health at the heart of the communities, so they can self-prescribe because it's right on their doorstep? So what was the question? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
I think there is an element of people power too. If you look at swimming in Bristol Harbour, which is very contentious, I was one of the activists involved in that. People were like, there is absolutely no way you're going to swim in the harbour, and well, our social prescribing programme will be starting a programme there this summer, and they have been swimming and it has been successful and nobody's died, and it is really tricky, but that was from people saying we want access, and we want to, and if we have passion and if we love these spaces, people then also want to take care of them. That we don't want poo in our water, we don't want the sewage overflows during the rains to overflow. So there is an element of us coming together at grassroots and the master plan as well.
Yeah, I've not got much more to add really. And for me, it always comes back to accessibility. So actually, how can we make these spaces more accessible? You know, so we are looking on the Harbour. There's All Aboard, which is a fantastic water sports centre which caters for people with disabilities. The more, I think, a lot of that often is ignored when we're thinking about blue spaces and access to water, whether there's adequate pathways nearby, as you say, if like walls are really high that you can't see over. You know, we enclose water space, you know, we need to open them up again, because the benefits, the physical benefit goes hand in hand with the mental benefit as well of having that access.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah, the person in yellow.
I guess from policy to more personal. I was wondering around how you protect surfing still as your source of blue health. So personally, I was involved 10 years or so ago addressing gender equality in skateboarding, and after a while it became such a big thing that I just hate skateboarding more. There was no joy left in it. I was lucky enough to get on a session where you and your son were there a while ago, and you were still having a great time. So is there any advice you can give where we can get involved in more of an active stance in something that we love without ruining that day?
God, that's such a really good question. I've not thought about it in that way. I've never got to the point where I've fallen out of love of surfing, honestly. So I honestly can't relate to that. To be really honest with you, however, you know, and it's more the opposite, that when I get absolutely, you know, times there's been some like super low times without a doubt over the last sort of 12 years or so, but that is the place that I go to feel better again, and remind me why we've built it. And actually, if I went for a surf, interestingly, if I went for a surf at the beach, I'd be happy, but I almost need to make sure that I'm happy in the space that we've created, for me to feel still that it's okay, that I've not fallen out of love with it. It's a curious question because I haven't thought about it, but I think I need to enjoy the space that I've created to make sure that I feel like it's going to be okay. And ultimately, it is around sharing those experiences. Like, I'm lucky enough to be able to have a son I can go surfing with, but it doesn't matter. It's you know, some of the loneliest times I've ever had surfing has been at the wave by myself, and it was like, oh my goodness, you're so lucky you had the wave to yourself. I hated it because it's a space that it needs to be shared. It was born to be shared, and it feels lonely when it's not being shared. Again, 2 days ago, I was up at the wave. Last week it was. I was up at the wave and it was flat and there's nobody around, and I was going, that's just, that's a tragedy. It's like, why are people not using it? It's a sunny day, why is nobody in there? And then we had a really cool retreat, came in, Blue Health Gathering on Monday, which was like super cool and relaxed and, you know, great vibes. And then today, like the mayhem of about 400 university students in there. And it's both cool, it's just people together. And that's what the space is designed for. So I haven't fallen out of love with the wave or surfing. As long as people use it, then I'm happy, honestly. Is there any advice in there? Possibly not. But that's how I feel about it at the moment.
Stephen's got the answers.
Good. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I can understand in the sense that I can definitely relate. relate to that, because that's a journey that I personally have been on, in terms of I had that first experience where I was just euphoric, where I was on a surfboard, and then very quickly fell out of love, but also continued to stay in love with it at the same time. And for me, the issue became around complete naivety when I entered into this sport. It felt completely open, and then the more I got into it, the more I wanted to explore and build my own kind of kit, the more I realised how inaccessible it was. So there's no company making wetsuits that are ready accessible. You've got to send them off or have them custom made. Of all the surfboard companies in the world, there's only one that makes an off-the-shelf surfboard that is adaptive in some way. There's other companies that are starting to make adaptations. And so I got really frustrated about, well, I want to surf there, or I want to just turn up tomorrow and go for a surf, but I've got to book assistance to get into the water, or I've got to find somebody in Croydon who will take me out into the water. And then what I started to do was then I kept a surf diary afterwards about how I felt when I was in the water. And I would do maybe a meditation beforehand, which is, I'm a yoga teacher as well. Before every yoga class I do a water meditation. But I also just came back to why I do this in the first place. What was it that put that smile on my face? And that's what I tried to remember. And actually, a lot of the other stuff then disappears around that. Once you get on that board, it isn't about catching the waves. It's about everything that we spoke about. It's being near the water, the sound of the water, the feeling of the water. You're a guest in the ocean. You're a guest in the lake at the way when you go there. You know, you've got to respect that. And the more you kind of get into that feeling and you understand that you're so lucky to be in that position, I think the waves just come secondary to that. You know, the smile comes first. And I definitely kind of, you know, always come back to that before every session. Yeah.
Have we got time for one more, do you? Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Just a comment and a question. So I was quite surprised by the statistics about how many people cannot swim or surf water, and didn't learn at only, they're adults and children. I'm one of those people I'm learning as an adult, and it's a wonderful experience to learn as an adult, but it means that there's like the whole period where I have been not enjoying the water in the way that I could have. And I'm just wondering, what do you think about national level, government level, what can we do to enable, give the access to people to learn earlier, or like what you were saying about your wife, like what the comment that you got at school, because it's good that there's the wave and there are 10 of them in the world, but how can we enable people to access it and learn and not be scared of the water much earlier? Because then they, I guess they would join and advocate for access to water, to enjoy the water because they would love it and experience it.
You can probably answer that better than anyone.
Yeah, so I mean that when I started Open Minds Active, that was one of the huge barriers, that we were just like, there isn't the cultural diversity in the water. There are all these adults that aren't able to swim, and there's so much fear around water. So since 2021, I think we've totted it up. I think it's 260 women of colour have learnt to swim with us. And of those women, at least half have gone on to enjoy other blue spaces, whether that's being near them, whether that's surfing, whether that's stand-up paddleboarding, sailing, all kinds of things. But what's happened as a result of that, it's the ripple effect that we've seen. So those women are now saying, well, I need to take my kids, like I need to make sure that my kids are learning. And the husbands are now coming. We work a lot with the Muslim community, and we provide sort of very safe women-only spaces. And a lot of the husbands are like, well, we want to learn as well now. And we're like, oh my goodness, we literally don't have enough access to pools, which is another, don't get me started on that. But access to indoor blue spaces is really tough, and it's very expensive, especially in a cost of living crisis. Like, to give you an idea, a small pool in Bristol, for us to rent for an hour is £90. And that's before we've put swim teachers in place, and we want to provide accessible, if not free, swimming lessons where possible. So we have got investment from big funders like Sport England. They've, from me pestering them, I think they were like, just keep that woman quiet in Bristol, give us some funding. But it's the long game, right? So we're training more teachers from all kinds of different backgrounds so that there's a different visibility and the workforce is more diverse. around swimming, and it's breaking down those barriers, but it takes a long time. But we know from the small bit of work that we've done with women that if you start with the women, it has that wider impact that ripples through the community, and that starts with the children as well. So that's been a huge thing. Anything else to add?
Just a comment on what you say, really around the long-term vision. We can be here, we can be, desperate to see a change in our generation. We want to see a change in the next 5 years, next 10 years, what have you. It does require that generational thinking, and think about what you're doing is all visionary. It's looking at how we can potentially shift a whole group of people into a different mindset, and that takes time. We absolutely have to start. It does start small. It started for me with 500 quid. You would have started with a space and some people that you wanted to come and teach. But you can see, even with the wave, that's grown exponentially over, since we've opened 5 years ago. It's absolutely within the realms of possibility to expand that much, much bigger. But it does need that generational thinking. And so, don't get me started on short-term thinkers, but more people from right up at government level all the way down to the people actively trying to do stuff on the ground. We need to be starting to think about a generational shift in behaviours, because we're only going to change people's behaviours, particularly health behaviours, if we change the environment. Because at the moment we're just telling them what they should be doing, but actually we're not giving them the facility that they can actually change those behaviours. So that requires long-term thinking, way beyond what politicians are thinking, which is normally in a 4-year cycle. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think it is about far more joined up thinking of people who absolutely want to see the benefits that they will never never see the benefits of what they're going to produce, but being able to start to see that and come together, particularly with that blue health movement, like what's the 50-year plan? Take out the egos, take out the people. What is the 50-year plan for blue health? That's the stuff that we should be talking about now, and then setting ourselves out on the path, which we're already doing, but continue that.
I think that was a perfect point to finish. We'll just leave that hanging there. I think we're there for time now, Julian. But yeah, thank you so much to
of course.
Nick and Stephen. Hand over to
technical glitch. Thank you to the Ardelfini for hosting us tonight, and to all the wonderful staff who've supported us, people at the Wave who've sent us fabulous images and stats, people at Open Minds that have helped us to support tonight's event. Whilst we offer these events for free, we'd be really grateful if in turn you could fill out one of our feedback forms that you'll be emailed by the end of the week. We need to hear from you both about what you enjoyed and to know how we can continue to improve these events. Please now, if you would like to go through to the foyer to enjoy your drinks, peruse books, you can go all the way into the bookshop, and you're very welcome to take drinks into the bookshop as long as you don't place them on the books.
Red, white, stains.
Chat to everyone and come back through here to watch some of Maggy's wonderful videos from her work at Open Minds Active. See you again in June when we'll be doing a river event for your more water-based joys. Thank you.